The Cursed Melodies. Written and read by me, Connie Glynn. For all the oddballs, you'll find where you belong. I found him in the shining of the stars. I marked him in the flowering of his fields. But in his ways with men, I find him not. I waged his wars, and now I pass and die. Idylls of the King, Alfred Lord Tennyson. We only go around once, I hope. Daria Morgendorfer. Before our story began. In the not-too-distant past, one you might almost recognise, a very important book was burning alive. A young man stood over the pages, encouraging the purple and blue fire with his voice, like a shepherd leading his flock. Never mind that it would not scorch through. The purpose of the spell was not to burn, not really, but to undo, to do what fire does best and transform. You see, this fire was not made from heat or sparked by flint. It came from the source of all magic itself, music. As the charm played, the notes in the melody hummed and soared, a conjuring so ancient it might change the very course of history. At least, that is what the man hoped it might do. Downstairs, there was a ruckus, the clatter of wood on wood, of furniture squeaking across floorboards. Voices shouted up the stairs. They had arrived. The man peered through the gap in the curtains, where a single sliver of moonlight tore a line across the room. The book kept burning. In the distance, purple-robed figures approached from the wooded path, with light singing in their palms. They moved slowly and deliberately, like the shadows cast by clouds. He knew whom they were here for, what they were here for. Attendants from the Shadow Library, come to take them to their king, to the Magisters themselves. It was time for the man and his companions to answer for their crimes. But first, before the lot of them were whisked away to meet their fate within the Shadow Library, that keeper of lost knowledge, spells and stories, before they would stand before the Grand Coterie for judgment, he must finish the spell. The fate of the world depended on it. There was a knock on the door just as the fire sighed into oblivion. With one last hiss, the contents of the book vanished. The whispering ink of the pages turning to nothing but a dark memory. A memory from long ago, when Rupert Faymore had pored over those withered symbols. Monsters, dragons and magic beyond his wildest dreams. All that time ago, when he'd asked himself that dreaded question. What's the worst that could happen from reading a book? Chapter 1. The Twins. 40 years later. Astrid and Jonas entered society in much the way they meant to carry on. Together, and with as much peculiarity as possible. Back then, Sister Teresa had not found a single baby on the convent doorstep. No, she'd found 2. Twins. They weren't swaddled in blankets or crying in a woven basket. When Astrid and Jonas were discovered on that bitterly cold February night, they each had a crown of yellow duckling feather hair and matching shards of a bone-white coin tucked beside them. They were clasping hands, they were fast asleep, and they were protected by nothing more than a bed of moss. What would become of such infants? What would society do with them? The same as it always did when confronted with the strange and unusual. Put them in confinement. And so it was that their worse-than-ordinary upbringing led them to this particular moment in time, where their story really begins. When, sitting in a stuffy classroom, Astrid had the sudden and undeniable tingle up her spine, the one that told her she was about to do something she was definitely not supposed to. At the opposite end of the room, 3 girls giggled and shrieked. "A ghost!"
Sample complete. Ready to continue?